Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second annual Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Law Moot. My name is Judy Michaely, and I am the co-chair of the organizing committee. Bienvenue tout le monde au deuxième concours de plaidoirie en droit de l'immigration, des réfugiés et de la citoyenneté. Je m'appelle Judy Michaely et je suis la co-présidente du comité d'organisation du concours. To begin, I would like to acknowledge that I am situated on traditional Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat territory. I invite you to acknowledge the traditional land on which you are situated. To acknowledge these traditional territories is to recognize their longer histories predating the establishment of the earliest European colonies. It is also to acknowledge the territory's significance for the Indigenous peoples who lived and continue to live upon them and whose practices and spiritualities were tied to the land and continue to develop in relationship to the territory and its other inhabitants today. J'aimerais maintenant passer la parole au juge Diner, notre présidente honoraire du concours cette année, pour lancer officiellement le début du concours. Le juge Diner est un juge de la Cour fédérale et il a été nommé en 2014. Avant son nomination, il a travaillé dans le domaine de droit administratif et d'immigration. Over to you, Judge Diner.
OK, merci beaucoup, Judy. Je vois qu'il y a maintenant moins de 30 personnes qui écoutent cette présentation. Alors, je ne sais pas ce qui se passait avec tout le monde. J'imagine peut-être qu'il prépare pour la plaidoirie. I don't know what happened to everyone. There's under 30 people listening in, but hopefully they're all busy preparing for their 11:30 moot. Anyway, je vais commencer avec des commentaires préliminaires. On m'a demandé de vous parler des origines de notre concours et la raison pour laquelle c'est important de le tenir. The story begins late one afternoon in 2015, I guess it was. I'd been with the court for just under a year, and I stepped outside my chambers on the 4th floor at 180 Queen West to talk to the security guards outside. The job of a judge can be a lonely one. In the before times, during the late afternoon, outside of court hours, things were pretty dead on the floor. But that afternoon in late February, I saw a whole lot of young, fresh faces, all eager and well-dressed, milling about, some of them huddled in small groups. And so I asked what was going on and was told that it was the start of the Wilson Moot. So I went over to the organizer's table and I said to them, listen, I'm just on the other side of the elevators here. If you ever need a volunteer. And lo and behold, the following year, I got an invitation and started my first Wilson Moot. The Fox Moot was a little bit different for a couple of reasons. First, it was in intellectual property, not constitutional law. And second, it was not nearly as geographically desirable. The Fox was taking place on the 7th floor of my building, not the 4th floor. So I had to walk up 3 whole flights of stairs or take the elevator. But nonetheless, I volunteered for that and got a call also the following year. So for 5 years, from 2016 until 2020, I had something to look forward to every February. And I found it great fun stepping outside the real world pressures of litigation. Instead, I walked into a world where counsel had prepared their arguments fabulously. There was unusual vigor in their voices. They listened to all the questions that the court asked very carefully. Gone were the intra-party skirmishes, the sideways glances, the sarcastic comments, unwelcome condescension, and unnecessary hyperbole. And best of all, I never had to make a decision, never had to render reasons or give costs, the most painful thing of all. I often wondered why court could not always be like this. Yet, after those 5 years of jumping between the Fox and the Wilson and their after parties, something still seemed incomplete. And it wasn't my mooting calendar, because I just volunteered for yet another moot, the Adam Fanaki Memorial Competition Law Moot. These three, the Fox, the Wilson, and the competition, had established themselves among a panoply of other moots across Canada, from family to criminal to tax law. Mais il n'y avait rien dans le domaine où on déposait le plus de dossiers dans notre cour, même avec l'augmentation annuelle du nombre de réfugiés, des avocats en droit d'immigration, probablement à cause de la croissance constante du nombre de réfugiés, d'immigrants économiques et de résidents temporaires. So I wonder to myself, why does immigration, which impacts so many of our lives, takes up so much airtime in the media and provokes constant political debate, not have a moot to call its own? I saw no good reason. So at the awards dinner for the 2020 Wilson Moot, the last time we had one of these things live and in person, I went to the winning team, who happened to be from U of T, and I said to them, hey, do you think your classmates would like to have a moot in the area of immigration? And they said an enthusiastic yes, and even offered to be involved in the initial feasibility study for this moot idea. So one of those winning mooters was Zoe Sebastian. Unfortunately, Zoe could not be with us this year to participate in the organization or judging, but she was an absolute anchor of the ILM in its first year. Sorry, my dog seems to be barking in the background. And so Zoe was an absolute godsend for our first year. And we also had another crew of indispensable people. We had Matthew Mendelson from the IRB legal team, Tony Navanilan from Legal Aid Ontario, Judy Michaely, who you just saw on the screen, from DOJ, Matt Chan from DOJ, who were all very involved from the early stages of the moot last year, and who all continue to be involved this year. And without all of their tireless efforts, we certainly would not be here today. So just want to have a shout out for them. But back to March 2020, we were fortunate enough to receive some early funding commitments that were going to pay for our first cocktail party and big awards dinner for this new moot. But we did wonder about the rest. For instance, would we have any students who actually came, or would it just be the 6 of us who would be going to Baker McKenzie for the fancy cocktail and sharing an intimate dinner at McCarthy Tetro the next evening? And even if we were able to hold the moot, how would the students get to Toronto? And why would the schools choose this moot, given all the other competitions that I just mentioned that were taking place? But as with all good things fated in the stars, the moot was meant to be, because what happened next was that COVID hit. And so a lot of our questions got answered. We had to quickly pivot, just like everybody else, and find out whether this moot would still be able to take place even without the fancy cocktail and nice dinner. But because we had not established the ground rules yet, we were able to, again, pivot and make this the Canada's first bilingual, fully virtual moot. We felt that that was going to be especially appropriate because immigration is so important to both Francophone and Anglophone communities across the country. And so this moot was going to be welcoming to everybody, no matter where they were. It was also going to be, just like immigration, inclusive, so that people didn't have to pay, the students didn't have to pay for their own costs to come to Toronto, or the schools didn't have to pay for their teams. It would be totally free to all. And most importantly, for all of you participating today, it would be a true reflection of what litigation was like post-pandemic. That is, all virtual, mooting by Zoom. I mean, not all of our court cases are virtual, but certainly a large number are, and pretty much all in the immigration field are. So having said that, it was inclusive to all the mooters like you. It was also inclusive to the organizers, and that was a big collateral benefit that we didn't envision when we designed the format to be that way. It allowed all parts of the legal system to come together. As I mentioned, you had people like Manuel from the board, lots of other of his colleagues from the IRB were participating, Department of Justice, I mentioned a couple of those, but many lawyers, if you look at the program today, you'll see are participating. We had judges, we had law clerks, we had all these different people involved in the process, in the immigration process, in the legal system across Canada that this moot brought together in kind of a collegial way, to where we might otherwise not be working together, and really created something special, I think. Most importantly, what it did was it brought us together so that you, tomorrow's stars, can shine. Alors, si vous avez un moment, s'il vous plaît, lire le programme pour le concours aujourd'hui. Vous allez voir non seulement nos généreux commanditaires, sans qui nous ne serions pas ici aujourd'hui, mais nous voyons aussi, vous voyez aussi les noms de toutes les gens que j'ai mentionnés qui ont participé dans les comités organisateurs. Alors, you know, they're really a Rolodex of people who you might want to reach out to in immigration and refugee law. They're the ones who've been doing all the heavy lifting for the past 2 years, from creating the question to marking your FACTA to answering all the queries that come in advance of the moot, to obviously helping out judging and doing the behind the scenes technology for these 2 days. Some of you already had a taste of their great work. You attended that session that we held about 3 weeks ago on launching your legal careers with Justices de Montigny and Sadra Hashemi, and also Jackie Swaysland and Aviva Basman, and all hosted by Rachel Jaworski from the Department of Justice. And it was a wonderful evening, and hopefully you learned a lot. Mais ce n'est pas la seule occasion d'entendre des bons orateurs, parce que demain soir, pour les cérémonies de clôture, vous allez entendre du juge en chef de la Cour fédérale, le juge Crampton, et puis aussi le juge Evans, qui était à la Cour d'appel fédérale, et notre cour, la Cour fédérale, et aussi, bien sûr, professeur en droit administratif, où il est une icône dans le droit administratif canadien. Et aussi, on va voir Rema Jamus-Ismail, le représentant de HCR, de UNHCR au Canada. Et nous sommes tellement reconnaissants d'accueillir Rema au milieu d'une crise humanitaire inédite qui se passe maintenant, pour avoir ses perspectives sur les questions relatives aux réfugiés. In short, the ILM has created a unique event wherein we can put aside our differences and work towards a common goal. It makes us realize how we all share, no matter what part of the system we play a part in, part of a much bigger whole. And given the events of the recent past that I just spoke about and others, we all certainly need to do our part. But one thing at a time, we're here to launch the second year of the ILM. It's still new, a little bit more experience than it was in March 2021. But unlike me, it doesn't have any gray hairs yet. It's still willing and eager to adapt. And so please give us your feedback if there's things you don't like, things that you think can be improved, because we're certainly here to change it, to adapt it, and to make it even better for the future years. We hope that you'll continue to be involved in immigration law, be engaged in it. It's a wonderful, exciting, and very relevant, for obvious reasons, area of the law. And we hope that you will continue to find a place in it, because there certainly is lots of place to be involved, and perhaps even in the future get involved in this moot. So thank you, good luck, and go get them today.
Merci, Juge Diner, pour vos remarques et d'avoir appuyé la concours cette année en tant que présidente honoraire. Nous sommes reconnaissants de votre appui continu. All right, now on to the moot and the mooters. All mooters should have now received the schedule of events for the moot. By way of reminder, today we'll have 3 preliminary rounds. At the end of the day, all the mooters will be informed by email of the 2 appellant teams and 2 respondent teams that are proceeding to the semifinal rounds tomorrow. The 4 teams advancing will also receive the opposing parties' factums by email at the end of today. Tomorrow, we'll have 2 semifinal rounds. All mooters are invited to attend. Those Zoom links are found in your moot materials, and anyone can watch those. They are open to the public. Following the semifinal rounds, the appellant and respondent teams proceeding to the final round will be informed by email as well. All mooters are invited to attend the final round. And again, the Zoom link can be found in your moot materials. At the end of day today, we will have the closing ceremonies where the awards, the end of the day tomorrow. It's been a long week. We will have the closing ceremonies where the awards will be announced. You have received a document with a list of ingredients and instructions for the cocktails and mocktails that we'll be making as a group during the closing ceremonies. If you haven't already and would like to, please obtain the ingredients in advance. As a reminder, mooters will be reimbursed up to $30 for the purchase of ingredients so long as they submit their receipts to the moot. Ça, c'est tout pour maintenant. Si vous avez des questions pendant le concours, veuillez les envoyer à l'adresse courriel du concours. Bonne chance à tous et amusez-vous bien.